Hello everyone. In this video, I will explain why we need to subtract imports from the aggregate demand equation. So how do we define aggregate demand? Aggregate demand is a function. It shows the relationship between the aggregate price level and the total spending measured in real terms on all domestically produced final goods and services over a given period of time. So who purchases domestically produced final goods and services? First, consumers. Consumer spending is by far the largest component of aggregate demand. Apart from them, firms can also engage in investment spending, which refers to spending on new capital equipment. Who else? The government. The government can use tax revenue to purchase goods and services directly. And finally, the rest of the world. Foreign buyers, a type of spending which is known as export. So why can't we just say that, hey, then aggregate demand is consumer spending plus investment spending plus government purchases of goods and services plus exports? Why do we actually need to subtract imports? It's not the same thing to exclude imports and to subtract imports. The answer is actually very simple. Take consumer spending as an example. Consumer spending is made of two components. The first component is consumer spending on domestically produced final goods and services. And the second component is consumer spending on final goods and services which are made abroad. And the same goes for investment spending. Firms can purchase capital equipment from domestic companies, but they can also purchase capital equipment from firms abroad. And the same goes for government spending. The government can purchase goods and services which are produced domestically, but the government can also purchase goods and services which are made abroad. So the bottom line is that if you take consumer spending, investment spending, and government purchases of goods and services, each of them can be split into two components. One would be the domestic spending, and the other one would be the spending on goods and services which are made abroad. And what do you get when you add the components of consumer spending, investment spending, and government purchases of goods and services, which is spent on final goods and services made abroad? Well, you get imports. But spending on imports should not be included in aggregate demand because, as I explained earlier, aggregate demand measures the total spending on domestically produced final goods and services. And that's why we need to subtract the value of imports in the aggregate demand equation in order to take out the components of consumer spending, investment spending, and government purchases of goods and services which are associated with spending on final goods and services made abroad. Okay, time to summarize. So, who purchases domestically produced goods and services in the economy? Consumers, firms, the government, and the rest of the world. Okay, there's aggregate demand? No, because as I explained, consumer spending can be split into two categories. This is domestic or spending on domestically produced final goods and services, and this is consumer spending on goods and services made abroad. And the same goes for investment spending and for government spending. Of course, this does not apply to exports. Is this aggregate demand? No, because remember, aggregate demand is only spending on domestically produced final goods and services. So if we want to have aggregate demand, we need to take out those components there. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take them out. Alright, so I take out this component, this one, and this one. Okay, and then I have aggregate demand. I can write now aggregate demand is equal to this. Okay, and what is that? It's the sum of these three components is just imports, right? So I can just here subtract imports, the equivalent, and I get aggregate demand. That's it. And overall, what do I have? I can just rewrite it. Let me just write the last equation. Basically, what do I have left? I only have spending on domestically produced final goods and services.